Hi, we're making a video today about why we decided to have kids. I'm here today with my husband Adam, and let's start. To start this video, we need to explain why we didn't want to have kids. So, in my case, I always thought I was gonna have kids, like everybody, like you get married, you have kids, you finish college, whatever. But then I came to the United States and I started traveling, and I just felt like I wanted to enjoy life. And so we got married, and you wanted to have kids, right?
Yeah, when we first got together, I immediately was like, "Oh, we're gonna have kids," because I have a son from a previous marriage, and I always told myself I didn't want him to be an only child. So I was like, "Kids, kids, kids! Let's have kids."
Yeah.
And she actually convinced me at the beginning not to have kids
Yeah.
because
My reasons, I mean, you have like
yeah,
I couldn't convince him. I kind of like have my reasons, but he was kind of like, oh, I don't know if this
yeah,
is the right choice for our marriage. But what I did was explain it to him. I'm like, I've been traveling to, like, in the United States. I've been everywhere. I've been to more places than you. And I, like, back in those days, I was only here for like a year or something when I met you. And I was like, you have been in the United States for so long, and you have only been to, I believe it was like 2 places. So I was like, don't you, because he had kids in a very early age.
yeah.
So I was like, don't you wanna like travel and then, I don't know, like enjoy your money and enjoy life and do other things? Those were my reasons. But you still were kind of like, I don't know if
Yeah.
this is the right choice.
So I grew up an only child, and I always said I didn't want my son to be an only child. Unfortunately, he was pretty much an only child because
Yeah.
by the time we got married, he was already.
Well, he had two step
He has
siblings.
two
Yeah.
step siblings, but
Mhm.
he was already 9 when we got together. So even if we were to have kids immediately, there was still going to be that age gap. They're not really gonna grow up together, et cetera, et cetera. And she,
Because he lives so far away.
yeah, and
Yeah.
also he lives far away, in a whole other state. And she convinced me like, hey, we should try and do some traveling and stuff. And the very early stages of our marriage, that's what we did. We traveled. I got to see a bunch of places that I had never been before. We still try to travel, but not as often. And so it got to a point where after a few years, I was like, you know what? Now the age gap is even larger. Sure, let's just say we're not going to have kids, and I was okay with
Yeah.
it. At
But
the
you
time.
also had that conversation with, in this party. I think that was like the point where you were like,
Oh, yeah.
definitely, like, yes, because you were kind of like unsure, like maybe later.
So, okay. So she's talking about. I have an uncle who had his third kid at like 47 or something like that, and basically that conversation kind of opened my eyes of like all the things he was struggling with because his daughter, his last daughter, she was, just getting into school, high school and stuff. She hadn't even graduated, and he's already 60 at this point, and he's talking about all these things that he's having to do, being an older dad. So kind of opened my eyes, and I told her, so you know what, if we're not gonna have kids by the time I'm 40, I don't want any kids because I'm not gonna be an old timer dealing with kids all of a sudden, after my son's already out of the nest, and then all of a sudden starting over. So that was that extra little push to just go ahead and say, all right, we're not going to have kids.
Yeah.
So
And then I think I have a memory. We were talking about that, like, I think this week or last week. I have a different recall about that conversation, but I have a memory where you told me, because I said I don't want to do any type of surgery to like not have kids until at least 35 years old, because back in those days I was 25, and I was like, I know, because people grow and they change and circumstances change. So I knew, I was like, I don't know if my life is going to be the same. I don't know if my mind is going to be in the same place in 10 years. So I told him, look, I don't want to do any type of surgery until I'm 35, because I mean, according to my research, that's kind of like the age where it starts getting
Yeah.
dangerous to have kids. So I said, if I by 35 I haven't changed my mind, then yes, I will consider the surgery. But before that, I just wanted to keep it open. Uh, my recall is that you told me you wanted to do surgery. Is that what happened? I don't know.
Oh,
That's my
yeah. No,
memory.
no, no. Yeah, that
Because
is
last week
that's
you were like, kind of like, no, I never said that, or I don't know. I
that's
You
part
did?
of that's
I don't know.
part of the conversation. I said that if I didn't have kids by the time I was 40,
Oh, it was 40. Okay,
that
so it was correct.
yeah,
Okay.
that I would
So,
go ahead and
do
snip snip.
surgery.
Uh,
Yeah, but I also heard that supposedly, and then there are times that it fails. Like you still can
yeah,
get somebody
it's
pregnant
not
even if
100%
yeah.
foolproof. Yeah, so I did also mention that if at obviously at that point, if I'm over 40, you're over 35, we aren't going to have any kids, then we should both do the surgery, just to be 100% safe. But
Mhm.
uh, you know, obviously that didn't happen. So
So now we're gonna get into why and how we changed our
yeah.
minds. It was initially me. I don't know if you had, like, I never asked you that, if that year you were, that was even in your mind, or if it crossed your mind.
Um,
Uh,
no, I just in general, once we said no kids, I kind of just okay, we're
close the
not.
door.
I didn't close the door, but I was like, okay, we're not gonna have kids, and I didn't want to push the issue, so it was just like, all right, if it happens, it happens. And I still kept to my guns in my head. I still, to this day, uh, I still want to do some type of surgery or something just to make sure I don't have kids at an older age.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like, I've always been. I've never been like, oh, I'm not gonna have kids no matter what. It was more like, I'm not trying. I'm not really interested.
You're just
But
going
if
with the
it
flow.
yeah, but if it happens, it happens. And
Okay.
yeah,
So back in 2022, it was October, uh,
October 18th, 2022.
October 18. We had the opportunity of getting two kids, getting custody of two kids. We didn't get two kids.
Yeah.
Getting custody of two kids. It was somebody we knew, and
Yeah,
we
kind
got
of a.
custody. It was kind of like an accident.
It was a favor, an accidental favor
Mhm.
to a friend of ours who was going through a custody battle. He lost temporary custody, and as a favor, we had gone through. There's a name for that, but we'd gone through the classes to become foster parents,
Mhm.
Coincidentally,
For another
and
kid that we had.
for a different kid that didn't work out, and we had the classes, and we heard about the situation, and we were asked like, hey, would you be willing to help out? It was supposed to be for a month.
Mhm.
You know,
And today they're still with us.
yeah,
So it's been 2 years
2 years and
and a month.
2 months. Actually, in a couple of days, it'll be 2 years and a month.
And a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're still with us.
Yeah.
So we've kind, they've kind of grown on us. And
So
it was really our first experience because my son doesn't live with us. It was our first experience of co-parenting,
yeah.
like in this relationship, in this circumstance, because we would co-parent in the summers whenever my son would come visit us, or over Christmas vacation, winter break, or any type of break that we had. Obviously, we had that experience,
And we
which was
also had some issues, because I mean it's kind of hard when there's
yeah
like
the
two families, and we
yeah
don't
there's
see very often, and like
yeah
each other, and
when you co-parent and there's four different parents involved. Unfortunately, I think that's a conversation for a whole other video.
we didn't have a chance to live that experience, like
Yeah,
co-parenting, like
and it
every
was
day taking kids to school, meals. Especially something that I was concerned was how we raise kids, because I was born and raised in Colombia, and you were born in Miami, but your dad is from Cuba and your mom was from Costa Rica. So it's like a bunch of different cultures mixed within one family.
Yeah, and then obviously it's the American culture, the way we raise kids over here versus the way they raise kids in Colombia. There are a lot of differences that too much to mention. But the thing with the co-parenting was that we didn't get that experience. Most co-parents live in the same state, same city, whatever. They interchange once a week, every other weekend. We didn't have that. We only would interchange over summer break, winter break, like I mentioned before.
Some
So
holidays
yeah, sometimes on the holidays, or we would go to him.
to Miami.
Uh, we had this. I had this thing where, oh, I haven't seen my son all year long, so it's time for us to do something. Oh, I got all these plans for the summer, and well, he would act out, being a kid that he is, and I was like, no, I don't care if he did this thing wrong. I still want to go to this event that I planned, or I still want to do this because I never get to see him. So that would cause a lot of animosity between us, and I mean, I don't blame her. She would, like, oh, I don't want to raise a kid with this guy who lets them do whatever they want. And that's the mentality I had
Yeah.
at the
And I was
time.
raised that way. I mean,
And
like
yeah,
consequences and all these things.
yeah.
So
And so we never had that experience, but we were given the opportunity of having that experience with the two kids that we got custody of, because at that point we were doing the everyday co-parenting of waking them up, taking them to school, daycare, showers in the afternoon, homework, all these different things where we actually got a chance to properly co-parent and have that experience of like, okay, well, this is what parenting is like, this is what our parenting is like.
and I was actually very like, I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah,
Like in my head, I thought it was gonna be different, and I was very concerned because they were not my kids and they were coming from other
Yeah.
issues. So I was like, I don't know, I don't want to get my craziness in their world but I was very impressed how we got into the same page
yeah,
so quick.
we learned very quickly that when it comes to parenting, we were on the same page, a lot more than either one of us expected. So we got that experience, and we got that our ideologies started to interlock, and we had the same views and the same things, and we would not step on each other's toes. And we realized that we are like, okay, well, maybe we can do this. And I know that that's definitely one of your reasons for all of a sudden.
And what they say,
Thinking,
God works
in
in
mysterious
mysterious ways.
Yeah, I really do think that was
meant to be for them and us.
Yeah, we helped them, and they helped us realize that, well, you know what, maybe we do want to give this parenting thing a try, and let's do it. And then one quick little added benefit was that was my personally my first experience dealing with a girl, with a daughter, because there's no girls in my family at all. All of us, all the kids that are my son's age in the family, all were boys. So there was I didn't have that experience of raising. I never had a cousin or a uncle or anybody with a daughter. So I never had that experience of dealing with a baby girl. But dealing with the girl that we were taking care of, I got to see a whole nother side of it. I was always afraid, like, oh, I never want a girl. Like I had this ridiculous philosophy of like, oh, it's gonna scare me, and I'm scared of having a girl. And it actually was the complete opposite. It opened my eyes to, or it opened my desire to one day have a daughter.
Yeah. In my case, I have another reason. So my mom started living with us back in 2021, but she was kind of like going back and forth. And I always thought she had like so much fun and things to do. And plans because she has a lot of friends in Colombia. But then that December, she spent a lot of time with us on 2022, and I got to see how lonely she was. And I was like, Mom, you can find all these hobbies, you can find all these things. But she was kind of like, I mean, to a certain extent, she's depressed, but she was also kind of like, I don't really care. I mean, I already did so many things in my life that I don't really care about that. So her life, I didn't know that about her. Her life was more about what was going on in my sisters and my life. So my sister has two kids, but they're already grown and like 20 something, and like they're big kids. So I was the next one with like all the I'm buying a house, we're doing construction, uh, now with these two kids, and she felt so needed that I had this thought. I remember in that December that I was like, what if I get to 60 something and all my reasons, oh, I want to travel, and I feel like, oh, I already traveled, like I don't enjoy it the same. Or, oh, all the books that I can read, and then I get tired of reading books. So I saw myself and my mom, and I was like, what if I get to that age and I can't reverse it? It's done. You can't go back. So that was another fact that impacted, or I don't know what word to
No,
use,
no,
like
you're
kind
right.
of like got in my head, and I started like, but I didn't want to mention it to him. I was like,
Yeah, but
if
but
I
I
open
know.
the door, then he goes like
Yeah.
with me, and maybe I want to back up. So I was kind of like thinking in December, like still like making sure that was the right choice.
And I know what you mean. Like I think we see it a lot in older couples that maybe have never had grandkids, and so they're like, oh, our kids are out of the house, they're off to college, and we're gonna retire and travel in RVs or do all this traveling, all these different things, and then they get to a point where they're like, well, what else is there to do?
Mm-hmm.
And usually you see, in movies and in real life, maybe some of you have this experience in your lives where all of a sudden, whoa, well, the first grandkid shows up and they're like, oh, now they have a reason to do other things. And so that's what she saw with her mom, and I saw it too with the kids.
What's next? Was it a hard decision? To be honest with you, no, it wasn't a hard decision. It just came to my mind in that December when with something gets in my head, I get obsessed, and then I do all this research and I think about it all day and I don't sleep. And then, so it was kind of like a very intense week where I was like, I need to make sure this is what I want, and I need to talk to him very soon, but I need to know. So I remember it was December 31st when I had this thought, and I was like,
Well, that's when you decided to
yeah, I
talk
was
to me
like,
about it.
definitely, this is what I want. I already did my research, I already know what I want next. So I talked to him, but I thought it was gonna be so hard. I was like, after all these years, how do I come and say,
Yeah. After
hey,
convincing me not to have
yeah,
kids for multiple years, and now all of a sudden I was like, well, now I'm going to convince them let's have kids.
yeah. So I thought it was gonna be harder. I actually don't have a lot of memories of that conversation. I don't know if you do.
So, yes, I remember the conversation. It was December 31st. It was early morning. We just got up, just brushed our teeth and everything, getting ready to go downstairs. And she's like, hey, let's talk. I have this thing to talk about. I know you think I'm crazy. And she was like building this up like, oh my God. Kind of like when you're trying to convince your wife that you want to spend money and you know you don't have money and you're just trying to like, hey, you have like this
Showing
whole
all the benefits.
presentation ready to
Yeah.
go, metaphorically. And I'm just like, okay, like what's up? And she's like, well, yeah, I think we should try to have kids. And like before she could even start giving me her top 5 reasons to have a kid, I was just like, okay, sure, let's have kids. And I was
Mhm.
just like, because like I said earlier, like before, I never really closed the door. I was just like, if it happens, it happens. I'm not actively trying, but I never said no. I just had that time limit of like, as long as it's before I'm 40, and whatever.
Mhm.
And if you don't mind, I like to make fun of her a little bit.
Why?
She has a conversation and she's like, okay, uh, we're gonna get pregnant. Let's try it. And basically, after we talk about it, she's like, all right, well, I'm thinking I want to have at least one or two kids by the time I'm 35, and she starts talking, and I'm just
That's
quiet.
actually the next question. The next
Okay,
question
so
is, was that good timing? So that kind of like starts answering that question.
okay, so
So
all right, so I'll give my side of that. So as far as the timing on having the actual kids, she starts talking about like, oh yeah, I want to have one or two kids. Um,
for sure,
uh,
too. No,
yeah, for
I
sure
would
too.
say,
Yeah, yeah. We that's another one of the questions. And she's like, and I want to have them by the time I'm 35. No later than 36. This and that. She's talking about it, and I'm sitting there, and in my head, I'm like, okay, well then we need to get started. And then she finishes her thought. I'm like, okay, well, so we we're gonna start now, right? And she's like, oh no, I got time. I still, because you were 33 at the time.
yeah. So I was
She's
like,
like,
oh,
no,
I still have
I got
until
time. We got 2 years, and I'm just like, okay, you want two kids, so
before 35.
before 35, so we need to start now. And she's like, what are you talking
I
about?
didn't
And
do my
I'm like,
math.
well, you need 9 months to make a baby, then you need to have the
Yeah,
baby, recuperate, and then another 9 months to have another baby. And I'm like, do the math. That's just the 9 months. There goes your year and a half, and then that little recuperation. I go, if you wait anymore, you're not gonna make your goal of before 35. And literally, like, you could see her kind of staring into the abyss, and kind of contemplating what I just had said, and she was like, "Oh crap, I need to start now. Like, we need to start now."
yeah.
And so, literally, we the very next day, January 1st,
I
we
remember. Sorry to cut you out, but I remember, like, going back to the question, was that good timing? I remember that I told you, I was like, I don't know if it's the moment, because back in those days I was still trying to figure out what to do with my, like, because
yeah.
long story, I had a job and then I started my own business and then I didn't like it, so I was like, I don't know, I'm still trying to figure things out. Also, the life insurance, no, the life insurance, the
Medical
health
insurance.
insurance here
Yeah.
in the States is just crazy. So I was like, hey, I don't know if it's a good time right now because we have to figure all these things out. And then I remember your answer. You
So
said it's never a good time.
yeah.
There's
So
always gonna
that's
be
the
something. There's always gonna be money. There's always gonna be
yeah.
insurance. There's gonna be something. Obviously, if you're in a really bad situation, I wouldn't recommend to anybody because, like, you don't want to struggle while
Well,
planning a kid.
see, that's the thing. So that's the other side of the question of the is it the right timing. So for any of you watching this that are asking yourselves the same question, like she mentioned, there's anybody who has any experience with having kids and financial issues while you're having kids or after or whatever, you come to realize there's no such thing as is this the right. I don't care how much you plan it or try to plan it. I don't care how much money or much financial peace you think you have. It doesn't prepare you for what comes along with having a kid, and vice versa. It doesn't matter how unprepared you are. You don't realize how resilient you can be once you have a kid. And it's one of those things that, like, I'm sorry, there's no playbook for having a kid at the right time. You can plan as much as you want or not plan as much as you want. Your kid's gonna come when your kid's gonna come.
Yeah.
And you
Parenthesis.
figure it out along the way.
I just wanna, since I mean I don't know how many people are gonna watch this, but I'm talking mostly about, like, okay, if you know this is the right person, yeah, because it's also not like I don't want to just be misinterpret, like, oh, I just want to have a kid, and then I'm dating this person that I don't even
Oh
know, and
yeah,
then I
yeah.
just whatever, let's go with the flow, and other things happen, and it's, I mean, I think the main thing to have a kid is knowing that you can provide a family to that kid. I grew up in my dad and my mom were together until my dad passed away, and my mom never got anybody else after he died like a long time ago. So to me, it was, I mean, your situation is different. Your parents got divorced, and I could see how messy it can be sometimes and how it can impact in people's life. You can say you're the most mature person, it impacts your life
Yeah.
and it changes a lot of things. So
Yeah, the
I
kids is
just want to tell
definitely
everybody,
affected
just
by
make sure it's the right person, and
well,
or at least
let's
you have
yeah,
the
let's at
feeling,
least
because
yeah,
you never know.
you
Yeah.
gotta at least have, and please don't misinterpret this. You should, let's correct ourselves. You should at least have a plan of how you plan on raising the child, because people don't understand. You could be rich and have all the money in the world. The love that a child needs has nothing to do with how much money you do or don't have. I mean, you can be the poorest person and have the most amount of love for your child that a that the richest person in the world would probably never give their kid, or vice versa. Or there's 20,000 different scenarios on which one works better or not. Um, but we believe, and again, this is just our opinion, we believe that building that family foundation is what's the most important part of raising kids. Not to say that single parents can't do it. Life
I
happens,
mean,
and
things happen.
yeah, life happens, and if that's your scenario, that's your
Yeah.
scenario.
But if you can plan it,
yeah, if you can plan it, and you can plan it with
if you
somebody,
have
and
the
you can talk
choice.
about it, and at the very least, be prepared for that sense. It's always going to be, we believe it's always going to be a better option for the kid's sake. For your sake, I mean, that's a different story. But for the kid's sake, growing up, we have the two different versions. We have the kid who grew up in the family setting with two parents and sisters, siblings, and all this stuff, and then you have the only child that grew up
Like
with,
literally the opposite.
yeah, the complete opposite,
Like
that
no
grew up with
sisters, no
no
siblings.
siblings, divorced. Parents got divorced when I was 11 or 12, something like that. Dealing with the two different families, the co-parenting, the different cultures, the kid manipulating.
Countries, because you
Yeah,
also
two
lived
different countries. Yeah,
in another country
yeah.
for a
One,
while.
my mom went back to Costa Rica. My dad stayed in Miami,
Yeah.
and then the whole the other side of it that people don't think about sometimes is the kid who's manipulating the two sides to get what he wants, and stuff like that. And then the emotional part of not having the family together, and all that stuff. I can safely say that she probably had more a more loving experience, even though she went through a very like a very hard financial situation growing up. Uh, but I guarantee her household had much more love and much more a much better family experience than my household, where um, financially I was good. My parents took care of me financially, my grandparents did too, but the love wasn't there, and the animosity, and
I mean, they
the
did love you, but
no, no,
it's
yeah, yeah. What I'm saying is the family love, that the what I believe a kid needs, the togetherness, the caring, the the all the stuff that you see in your holiday movies and all that stuff, everything that a kid yearns for when they're growing up, and then unfortunately I missed out on all of that part of it. So I
and,
think
and I'm sorry,
it's
I think that influences a lot in how you were raised also, because
yeah.
obviously, because my family were always like, they were always together, and in your case it was like so many different things changing and people, um that's why, to a certain extent, with your son we had all these differences, because you understood the dynamic where it's like, oh, whatever, we do this one day and then we do something different the next day, and then we just keep this other person happy, and it does like all these like changing things that I wasn't used to, because I'm like, no, there is only one way of doing things. Like, you do it this way and this is the right way, and it doesn't matter what happens around. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter oh, I haven't seen this person for this. I don't care. This is the way you have to do things. And so that's what caused with your son, like this huge
Yeah.
difference. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
definitely. It definitely was a huge factor in a lot of the decisions that we made and how we experienced stuff. But it was all these different things that came together and that
So
influenced the
perfectly.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like it was good timing for us. It was good timing.
That was
You
good
know,
timing. Yeah.
not everybody gets that the good side like that. Not everybody has that opportunity, which we completely understand, and more power to you if that's your story. Um, but if you have the ability to control that part of it, you should always try.
Yeah.
You know.
So the next question is, were you mentally prepared? I don't know. I know guys are more kind of like whatever.
So my answer is real quick and easy. I was mentally prepared because I had the experience of having my son. You know, when uh, um, I tried to do things right with him, and I was married to his mom, and we tried the whole family thing for a while. It didn't work out, um, but I had that experience. She had zero experience, so I could imagine, as most people are when they don't have kids, and all of a sudden, boom, you're pregnant. I'm sure it's overwhelming. I mean, it was overwhelming for me 17 years ago. My son's almost 17. It was overwhelming back then, of course. So I remember that experience, but all these years of me already being a parent, mentally I was
You were
fine. That's why
prepared.
I think that was part of the reason why it was so easy for me to be like, okay, let's have kids,
Whatever.
and it is what it is.
In my case, I think when I make a decision in general, um, I'm just I go for it, you know. So I'm not like, oh, and whatever comes with it. Like before I make the decision, I overthink it so much, and I don't sleep, and I research, and I do all these crazy little things that by the time I'm into whatever we're doing, I already thought about all these things. Obviously, there are new things, but I also think about, okay, there are a lot of crazy things that are gonna happen that I can't expect, and I just take it. So it wasn't as hard for me. Um, Mentally, we were going through some situations in the family, like it was kind of like a how do you call that? Like a not bad timing, but it was kind of like, I don't know the word. In general, we had a lot of things going on in the family, with his family, with my family, both families. Um, so I wanted to at least talk about this part because I had to, like, there was a period while I was pregnant that I was very stressed, and then I went to this doctor, and that's something that I had to manage uh, before I got pregnant and after I got pregnant. Uh, about you kind of have to put everything on the side because you're in this project, you're having a baby. I didn't know you can affect your baby if you're crying or stressed or like whatever is going on in your head. It kind of goes to the baby. So mentally I had to prepare myself to say, okay, whatever is going on. And I'm talking about, okay, we had these issues, but there are people that have a lot of stress at work, that have other factors that they like. I just wanted to explain that do your research, but it is very important that you manage yourself to put everything aside, because now you're creating this life, and it starts from the pregnancy. It's not like after the baby is born.
Yeah, yeah. That's. I will say this. Not to try to advocate for anything specific, but mental stability is a very important factor with pregnancy. So, um, ladies, if you're pregnant or planning on getting pregnant, you want to try and focus on your own mental stability because it does affect the fetus, the child. And like she said, do your research. We're not
Yeah.
just giving our opinion here. This is legitimate fact.
Or don't
And
do it just because you're unstable at the moment, because there are people that are like, oh, I'm going through all these issues with my husband and I'm just gonna get pregnant to fix the problem.
Yeah,
That's
some
actually
people.
worse.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we know people in our lives that have
Yes.
that have gone through that, and that probably is worse.
It doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah.
And something that you told me once, obviously you were married before, and I never saw it that way, never thought of it. I remember we had a conversation when we first started, like we're talking 10 years ago, and I told you, well, when we were talking about having or not having kids, I said, well, I think it was like people had kids so they can stay together to have a reason to be together. And no, you were the one who told me that, because you need to have a reason to stay together as a
Mhm.
family. And I told him, and I said, well, you had a kid and you still got divorced, so that's not a reason. So if you're ever thinking about, hey, I'm gonna fix my marriage
Yeah.
by having a kid, doesn't mean anything, because people get divorced, so that's not a
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah, and
We're
not
getting
to
into something.
yeah, not to
Yeah.
get too far off subject. Just in case this is your situation, I will mention just very quickly on what she just
Yeah.
talked about. Um, it goes back into what I just said, mental stability, and this is for the guys too. Like your mental stability, it rubs off on your partner, and you looking out for her mental stability is also very important because again, her mental state affects the baby's mental state, and don't ever, again, opinion here, don't ever think that you have to deal with a crappy situation just because of the kids. At the end of the day, you need kind of like on an airplane. All of us have been on an airplane, and they tell you, hey, before you help the person next to you, put on your oxygen mask first, and then help them. At the end of the day, if you both pass out because you're too busy trying to help him and you're not good, well, who's going to take care of you both? Same situation. If you're not fixed, if you're not good, how are you going to care for your child, or how are you going to care for your relationship? You need to be just a little bit selfish and make sure that your mental state is good, guys, ladies, both of you. um, because if you're doing it for that reason, if you think that, oh, sticking around for your kid or having a kid or doing something like that is going to fix a problem, no, you need to fix the problem first before you throw that problem onto other people or your kids in this
Yeah.
case or anything like that. Um, but yeah, that's it's a very huge factor. Unfortunately, she went through a lot of problems because of the stress that she had, which led to physical problems. She had a dramatic amount of hair loss.
At the
She had
beginning.
at the beginning of
Yeah.
of the first pregnancy. She had issues where her hands were going numb. There was a lot of different things that happened,
Mm.
and
And it was a
after
stress. I thought it was the
yeah,
pregnancy, and it wasn't.
after speaking to multiple doctors and eventually landing with a
Neuro.
neuropsychologist,
Mhm.
we realized that what was causing the problems was her mental state.
Mhm.
And not to get into crazy details, but there was a lot of
We can
stress
make a
in our lives.
video
Yeah,
about that
there
later.
was a lot of
Yeah.
stress in our lives at the time, both of us, her more than me, and that was a big factor of it. I was oblivious to how stressed she was, and could I could have and should have done better. So that's why I tell fellas, it's not just about you; it's also about her and her mental state and what you can do to help her mental state. But, anyways,
I'm
moving
gonna
on.
make a small break.
We had to actually split the video in two parts, so see you in part two.